Every global company faces a critical decision. Should they produce goods at home and export them, or build factories directly in foreign markets? They can export from a single central hub or invest in local production. This is the heart of the proximity concentration trade off. Proximity means being near the customer, while concentration aims to achieve economies of scale. We will explore how businesses balance these two competing forces. In 1997, economist Lael Brainard revolutionized our understanding of global trade. Before this framework, most economic theory relied on the assumption that companies expanded abroad primarily to access cheap labor. Brainard argued that this was too simplistic. Instead, she posited that multinational expansion is a complex corporate-level decision driven by intangible assets and market proximity rather than simple cost arbitrage. Brainard shifted the lens from factor proportions to firm-level assets. By studying how companies with proprietary technology or high brand value allocate resources, she provided the anchor for modern global trade policy. By the late 1990s, multinational corporations had fundamentally changed how the world trades. It was no longer just about moving goods across borders. In fact, sales through foreign affiliates already dwarfed direct exports. Companies were increasingly producing goods inside the countries where they sold them, rather than simply shipping finished products. The data revealed a new reality. For many multinational giants, being physically near the customer was often far more valuable than the cost of shipping from a central home hub. In the world of global trade, companies face a fundamental dilemma known as the proximity concentration trade-off. Proximity refers to the strategic choice of locating production near the customer. This helps avoid tariffs and allows the company to respond quickly to local needs. On the other side is concentration. This strategy focuses on achieving economies of scale by centralizing production in one efficient location to keep per-unit costs low. The tension between these two strategies is the primary force that shapes the footprint of modern multinational corporations. Companies often choose to build factories close to their customers, a strategy known as proximity. This approach serves as a defensive shield against trade frictions. Exporting from a distant factory incurs high transport costs and often forces products to cross trade barriers like tariffs, which inflate the final price. By producing locally, companies bypass these costs entirely. They gain the advantage of speed, allowing them to respond instantly to local market fluctuations and changing consumer demands. Ultimately, proximity is more than just logistics. It is a strategic necessity for businesses looking to remain agile and resilient in a fragmented global market. Concentration is the strategic choice to keep production in one place. It is driven by a powerful concept called scale economies. When production is scattered across many small plants, overhead costs are duplicated. This results in higher per-unit production costs. By concentrating production into a single massive factory, firms achieve scale economies. They spread high fixed costs over a much larger volume of output, creating lower per-unit costs. Ultimately, concentration is about maximizing efficiency through volume. Businesses evaluate trade-offs through a decision calculus, balancing the benefits of scale against the necessity of proximity. Exporting from a single, concentrated facility leverages economies of scale, keeping per-unit costs low. However, when shipping costs rise or trade barriers like tariffs are introduced, the advantage of a single site diminishes. As these burdens accumulate, the scale tips. The costs of maintaining distance eventually outweigh the efficiency gains of concentration. The tipping point is reached when proximity to the customer becomes a strategic necessity, forcing production to move abroad. To empirically validate the trade-off framework, researchers analyzed a comprehensive data set covering 27 countries and 63 different industries. A critical methodological improvement was the move away from simple geographic distance as a measure of trade difficulty. Instead, the study utilized precise data on actual freight and insurance costs, providing a much more accurate reflection of the true barriers to shipping goods across borders. By shifting from rough distance estimates to concrete financial metrics, the data could clearly map how shipping expenses influence location decisions. Research confirms a clear correlation. As trade barriers and shipping costs rise, firms increasingly shift from exporting to local production. The data indicates that higher tariffs directly incentivize companies to build abroad. Furthermore, high shipping costs make the proximity strategy essential, and local production acts as a safeguard against logistical volatility. By 2026, the reliance on a single global factory model has diminished. Companies have shifted toward a regionalized strategy, establishing hubs in the Americas, Europe, and Asia. This approach balances the need for large-scale production with the imperative of local security. Each hub serves its own market, reducing the risk of global supply chain disruptions. Regionalization ensures that trade flows remain resilient, even in an era of geoeconomic fragmentation. In 2026, trade barriers have moved far beyond traditional tariffs. We now face geoeconomic barriers, where industrial policies and subsidies act as major drivers for corporate location decisions. Policies like the CHIPS Act or the EU Green Deal create powerful financial incentives. Companies are no longer just looking for the lowest cost, they are chasing the incentives that make local production viable. Finally, geopolitical tensions make proximity a defensive strategy. By localizing, companies hedge against the risks of global supply chain disruptions, prioritizing security over pure efficiency. Historically, companies built massive, centralized factories to achieve economies of scale. This concentration was the only way to drive down per-unit costs. However, AI and robotics are changing this math. Advanced automation allows for smaller, highly efficient, and programmable production cells. With these microfactories, the need for a single massive plant diminishes. Companies can now prioritize proximity, building automated units closer to end customers without sacrificing cost efficiency. In the digital era, the proximity concentration trade-off has evolved. Proximity is no longer just about shipping physical goods. It is about data sovereignty and reducing latency. Companies now build local data centers to minimize the time data spends traveling, known as latency, and to comply with local data sovereignty laws. These local facilities serve as modern digital factories. By keeping services close to the user, firms ensure high-speed performance and adherence to national data protection regulations. Ultimately, digital proximity is now a strategic necessity, mirroring the same trade-off logic that Brainard established decades ago for manufacturing. In the global trade landscape of 2026, sustainability is a new form of trade barrier. Long-distance shipping generates high carbon emissions, which are increasingly costly to companies. Carbon border adjustment mechanisms, or CBAM, impose taxes on goods based on the carbon footprint of their production and transport. This effectively acts as a tariff on long-distance trade. To avoid these taxes, companies are incentivized to move production closer to end users. This proximity strategy reduces shipping distances and lowers carbon liabilities. By localizing production, businesses optimize their supply chain to meet both environmental regulations and market demands, shifting the trade-off toward proximity. Consider the global auto industry. To produce electric vehicles efficiently, companies are shifting away from centralized battery production. Instead, they are building massive battery plants right next to their car assembly lines. This proximity strategy is driven by two main factors. First, local content requirements often mandate that a specific percentage of vehicle value must be produced within the region to qualify for tax credits. While labor costs in these regions are often higher than in centralized offshore locations, the proximity advantage reduces shipping risks, logistical costs, and ensures compliance with regional trade policy. Ultimately, the strategic need for supply chain resilience and policy qualification outweighs the simple economies of scale, proving that proximity is now a top priority for global manufacturers. While the proximity concentration framework is a powerful lens for understanding global trade, it serves as a simplification of reality. Academic research acknowledges several important limitations and caveats. First, the model often overlooks the impact of complex tax rates and local regulatory hurdles, which can be just as influential as transport costs or scale economies. Additionally, supply chain fragility and the need for strategic diversification can force companies to move abroad even when it isn't the most cost-effective choice on paper. Ultimately, business decisions are multifaceted. This framework provides an essential baseline, but in a world of fragmented trade, it must be combined with a deeper analysis of geopolitical risk and fiscal policy. The proximity concentration trade-off acts as the law of gravity for global business. Companies balance the need for local market access against the cost savings of massive centralized production. Trade barriers, automation, and sustainability requirements are currently tipping this scale toward proximity. Ultimately, a firm's global strategy is a dynamic adaptation to these fundamental forces. The proximity concentration trade-off is the fundamental lens for understanding modern corporate strategy. Whether it is news about trade barriers, massive factory investments, or the shift toward regional hubs, this framework helps decode the logic behind the headlines. Understanding this framework allows you to see past the noise. Global expansion is rarely just about labor costs. It is a strategic balancing act of scale versus resilience. Apply this lens whenever you analyze the next wave of global corporate expansion.